Hello everyone, this is LockOS, and welcome back to DCS World for the Mirage 2000C. In this video we're going to be doing a takeoff, flight, and landing tutorial in VFR conditions, or Visual Flight Rules conditions. We're going to go ahead and also briefly point out some other things. So, when you finish taxiing to the runway, if you can and sometimes will get clearance to immediately start taking the active runway. Especially if there's especially if you're an online server and there's nobody really on the server, or if you're in a single-player mission. If you are, however, asked to hold short, this is a great time to double-check settings in the cockpit. Make sure you have your bingo fuel set to your bingo setting right here for your fuel to a reasonable amount. You can set your altitude hold indicator or altitude hold selector up here. Go ahead, make sure your radar is warming up. Make sure your countermeasures are all set up. Make sure your TACAN and ILS down here. In fact, I'll move my. There we go. Your TACAN and ILS are set to the right airport, so we're going to go ahead and do that actually. There we go. And then we can set our ILS to the right frequency as well. There we go. And that's all active and good to go. Snapping back over here to this interview, everything looks good. Also to note, if you did uncage the backup ADI while you were starting off in your parking spot, now I will say this is something that you must do before, or highly recommend that you do before taking the active runway. Reset your ADI. You can left click, mouse click, and it'll bring up this red flag, and release it, and it will recenter out your backup ADI, which will be very useful, because there are times where if you're taxiing around on the ground, your backup ADI will become crooked, and then this way it'll be nice and level for your flight in case you need your backup ADI active. So, putting a little bit of power and thrust to the engine to start going again, making sure our nose wheel steering is active, and it is good. So notes about taking off in the Mirage 2000C. Once we get lined up down the centerway, the Mirage 2000C during both takeoff and landing is very susceptible to popping its tires at high speeds. You definitely want to start rotating the Mirage and getting the nose up at around 100 to 120 to 150 knots. You want to get it up to between 5 and 10 degrees. If you pull too hard, for instance, if you start pulling up to 15 degrees, you might take off early and then lose airspeed and then come back crashing down. Or you'll end up just bouncing down the runway because your aircraft is getting speed, but it's not enough speed to stay airborne for very long. So that is something you want to note. Try to keep between 5 to 10 degrees. Also, with 15 degrees, if you go above like 10 degrees and start hitting like 15 degrees, you could easily also end up with a tail strike. Where that is where the back half of your aircraft hits the ground, and it's just dragging the tail of the aircraft with the engine nacelle on the ground, and that's bad. So but you still definitely want to get at least 5 degrees on the nose, so that way whenever you take off, that way you'll start you reduce pressure on the main landing gears, so you won't pop your tires. But also then when you take off, you'll be able to take off at a reasonable speed. So, other thing to note is, because we are in a air-to-air configuration, there we go. Just want to make sure that wasn't the parking brake. That's the wheel brakes right there. Double checking that to be sure. We have Mirage. We have Magic 2s on the wings, and Super 530s on the inboard pylons with a centerline fuel tank. This is a fairly standard air-to-air loadout. With the Mirage 2000C, because its engine is really powerful, you don't necessarily need afterburner for a takeoff with this air-to-air relatively lightweight configuration. If you want to use afterburner, go ahead, especially on a shorter runway. However, because this is a longer runway on a military airbase, we should be fine to just take off with mil power. Also, however, if you are carrying a lot of air-to-ground ordnance, or especially if you are taking the extra large wing tanks, definitely go ahead and use afterburner. The Mirage 2000C can definitely use it, not necessarily in getting speed to take off, but actually gaining speed for the climb later on. We're just going to go ahead for a nice smooth military power takeoff, so we're going to hold down the wheel brakes, or the toe brakes, start increasing power, release pressure on the toe brakes, and then we're going to do the final little bit of touches to get the the engine power up to 100%. Keep an eye on the speedometer. Oh, remove nose wheel steering once we get to around 80. Start pulling back around 100. Getting a little bit of back pressure on the stick. There we go, not too much. I'm going to try to keep the nose roughly at 5 degrees. Between 5 and 10 degrees. There we go, 170. We should get... there we go. We should peel off at around 170, 180, 190. There we go. Gear up. And I'm going to pause, actually. And as you... well, hold on. Just for the sake of this tutorial, as you can see, our gear are intact. Again, as long as you get... the important thing with the Mirage 2000C to not pop the gear is to get the gear up, to get off the ground above 100 and above 190 to 200. Around 108, around 190, 200, 250... well, definitely 250, but around, especially above 200, you really do risk popping your gear. Okay, let's get the gear back up. So, that was just a showcase. That was just, again, the showcase and prove that you definitely want to get your gear up above. You definitely want to get your Mirage 2000C up before it gets too fast on the ground. And as you can see, at 100% throttle, we're still accelerating quite handily at low altitude. We're already just taking off, and we're already at 300 knots and a 5-degree climb. Mirage 2000C at 100% no power with no afterburner can get really fast, really quickly. So that is one of the Mirage's strengths. We're just going to go ahead and do a little bit of now VFR flying over the coastline. We're going to go over the coastline a bit and then head on in and then come in for a landing in a little bit. I am going to probably go ahead and put on burners soon, just so we can burn up the fuel tanks to, we can burn off the fuel in the external fuel tank to both give a bit more of a realistic weight for landing, as well as to point out something that's going to be very important later on. So we're going to go ahead and gauge burner. The Mirage definitely does like to be above 300 knots for a flight. If you get the Mirage above 350 to around like 450 in flight, that tends to be where it really likes to fly at. But we're going to go ahead and do afterburner, burn some fuel, burn some time. Save some time. At only 7,000 feet, we're already going nearly Mach 1 at full burner with very little time. 600 knots. I'll show you where the Mirage really likes to be, though. Down low, it's really good because it's nice thick air. But as the Mirage is designed as an interceptor, it really likes to be up in the air. So we're going to go ahead and, while we're in burner, do a bit of a zoom climb. Go up to 40 degrees climb. 40, 45 degrees climb. That'll be good. Alright, you can see we're already up to 20,000 feet. Our Mach has only gone down by like 0.20 in the climb, and we're already at roughly 27,000 feet. We're already now at Mach 0.75, and we're almost at 30,000. Mach 0.70, and we're at 30,000 feet. I'm only going to cut power. I'm only going to get out of the afterburner detent and go to full mill power now as we leave it out for our normal flight. Mainly because something to know with all aircraft that have afterburners are you can't. Most aircraft do not like to have their afterburners ran consistently. The problem with running your afterburners consistently is that the fuel pumps might not be able to keep up. It varies from aircraft to aircraft, but that's one of the reasons why you don't want to be in full burner all the time. But if you But if you give the fuel tanks quote-unquote a rest and go back to mill power for a bit, it'll fill up the feeder tanks again, and then you'll be able to go on burner again in a little bit. Plus, being stuck on afterburner does burn your fuel quite aggressively. So as you can see, we're at 100% mill power, and we're only at, while we're at 35,000 feet, the Mirage is only doing an indicated 195-ish knots. However, that is indicated on our Mach meter down here. We are actually at 0.6 Mach, and that is to be expected. I'll throw on altitude hold here. Just because the aircraft we're so high up that our speed is, our indicated airspeed is low because there's not a lot of air going over our sensors and over our wings. So our indicated airspeed, which is our effective airspeed for maneuvering, is relatively low. But if we bring up the indicator down here, we're actually at 360 true airspeed. Now, granted, as you've noticed, at 100% RPM of our engines, we are gaining speed relatively slowly. But even then, this is not where the Mirage. The Mirage can fly up here, and it can fight effectively up here against bombers in a straight line. This is not a really good. The Mirage doesn't like to be up at 35,000 feet doing dogfight maneuvers, mainly because your indicated airspeed is so low. Your maneuverability is going to be hampered quite a bit. We can't go again into burner. And we can get this airspeed up really fast and really high. So we'll see how fast we can go both in indicated airspeed and in ground speed after at least a little bit of flying in burner. And keep in mind, this is all this performance data is, or like examples, are with still a relatively full fuel load. We still have an external tank on the centerline fuel pylon, which is adding drag and mass, but also there's still at least a little bit of fuel left in that tank, as well as the fact that the external tank, which just emptied right now, because there's I'll showcase that in a little bit, it had a little bit of fuel in it. But now our internal tanks are full still, so there is that. Also note that at, I know it's bigging at me. There we go. We'll address that in a little bit. You'll notice that at 35,000 feet, our airspeed is now, the Mirage 2000, at 380, but we have to be an afterburner to achieve this. But even at this low indicated airspeed, we are still technically at Mach 1.1, and our true airspeed is close to around 640. And the Mirage 2000C can fly really fast at these altitudes. You can get, I've gone the Mirage 2000C easily at around, up to like 800 knots indicated at these higher altitudes. Problem is that you are burning a lot of fuel because you're sticking an afterburner for the entire bit of time. Plus, again, really, you're this high up, you are leading a very noticeable contrail, which I will actually probably showcase now. I'm going to disengage autopilot. We're also going to, before we start turn, we're going to, while we're turning slowly, this fail audio warning reset button. And I hit that audio reset warning button because it's giving us a failure. The failure is a configuration failure because over here on this fuel panel, ET has popped up indicating that our external centerline tank is empty. So with our external centerline tank empty, we can switch from air-to-ground fly-by-wire to air-to-air fly-by-wire. So do keep in mind that if you are in the Mirage 2000C and you get a configuration warning while flying with an external fuel tank in the centerline pylon, that means that your centerline fuel tank is empty, and you can switch your fly-by-wire mode to air-to-air mode. So do keep in mind that is something that's going to happen to you during most flights, especially if you equip a centerline fuel tank. So keep that in mind. Centerline fuel tank with an air-to-air loadout. The configuration light will flash whenever your centerline fuel tank is dry. If you are doing air-to-ground ordnance, it'll still remain lit until you expend all the fuel from your centerline fuel tank and all the air-to-ground ordnance. In which case, then the configuration light will pop up. You'll go ahead, and then once that configuration light pops up, switch to air-to-air mode for your return trip home after you expended all your ground ordnance. So let's see here. We're going to go to waypoint. I'm going to fly to waypoint 2. There we go. Point 2 is this way, so we're going to go ahead and line up that little bit of a castle right there on the way home. And I will actually probably go over HUDs. I will make a separate navigation tutorial to talk about the navigation HUD, which is the current HUD mode that we have right now. But navigation is going to be its own separate tutorial. I will break out navigation into basic and advanced. Because it's going to be a whole... with INS systems, I'm going to give an INS system for all these aircraft. Not just the Mirage 2000C, but the F-14, whenever I cover that, the F-18, the F-16. INS systems usually require a full video to explain in detail. Not just really their use is simple and within a basic tutorial's parameters, but it's very much a... setting up the INS for use is a whole nother ballgame. Alright. So you can see the Mirage 2000C can climb up to 4,000 feet. It is very capable of being at these higher altitudes. It does not like flying at these higher altitudes, however, just because you're not getting a whole lot of wings. You're not getting a lot of airspeed for your Delta wings. Plus, and it's just a matter of practicality. Most fights in DCS and most mission designers have a lot of their engagements happening between 30,000 feet and 10,000 feet. So we're going to go ahead and just push down a little bit on the nose, get into a bit of a dive. I'm going to showcase performance. of the Mirage 2000C, a bit more of a reasonable altitude. And once we get down to 2,000 feet, we're going to start navigating our way also back to the airbase for landing. So there really isn't too much more to showcase with the flying Mirage 2000C. It's a relatively easy aircraft to fly once you get it airborne. It definitely does have a really good instantaneous turn rate. It does also have a decent continuous turn rate as well. So this is definitely it is definitely designed and meant for interception. It's definitely no slouch in a dogfight. Just looking over my wingtip to point out, to keep in mind also, while you're doing air-to-air combat, this is more of a general air-to-air combat note, you only have, at most, like 4 air-to-air missiles, so do keep in mind that while you're flying around doing your air-to-air, doing your mission, you're not, unlike the F-16 or F-18, you're not going to have really a lot of magazine depth to dealing with air-to-air threats, so do keep in mind that you want to keep, as such, your airspeed up. Keep your airspeed up, so that way you can potentially outmaneuver any threats that might be coming your way to get into range to fire your own missiles at them. So that is something to note with the Mirage 2000C. Alright, we're almost at 20,000 feet. There's the Burj Khalifa. There's our Aminad Air Base right there. I believe that's Abu Dhabi International right there. So we're going to orbit around Abu Dhabi International, and we're going to come in to land at Aminad. In fact, let's get to waypoint 5. There we go. We're at 2,000 feet right now. I'm at 20,000 feet right now, so we're going to level out. Go into burner again. Mainly we're going to go into burner just to burn a bit more fuel. I do want to come in relatively light, with the Mirage 2000C. The Mirage 2000C, like I said in my takeoff portion of this video, does not like landing heavy. It does not like landing heavy because the tires will pop. Plus, because of the way the Mirage 2000C is designed, it doesn't like to come in necessarily too slow either. So you do want to come in somewhat fast, which means that if you're coming in fast and heavy, there's a good possibility you're putting a lot of pressure on the tires. So when you land, you might collapse either the gear strut or pop a tire. So making sure, when you're coming in to land, do keep in mind that you might want to on the return trip home, if you have a lot of fuel, because if you did a short combat flight, just go into burner, just to burn off a little bit of extra gas, so you're coming in a little bit lighter. Right. There's Omninod right there. Alright, so we're going to cut down power. So roughly around 80%. And I should also probably mention a good cruise throttle setting for the Mirage 2000C is between 80 and I would probably say like 95%. I normally like to leave the Mirages, depending on my flights, usually I leave it closer to around like the 85 to 90% mark. You will still travel at a very good clip at 85% throttle with the Mirage 2000C, while also not getting your fuel burn rate too excessive. The Mirage 2000C is very aerodynamic in that sense, and it is a very effective for flying a good long while, and because you can get both the fuel efficiency and the speed to cover lots of distance. Plus, even with the centerline fuel tank, you can get quite a lot of fuel. Like even now with that short bit of flight, we still have we were still in afterburner for like a good bit of that flight, and we still have 2,100 kilograms of fuel, which is quite a lot. So we're just going to do a basic straight-in approach, and we're going to be, in fact, just for the sake of this tutorial, getting lined up. We're just going to come in and assume we're doing a longer straight-in approach. So, get lined up for a straight-in approach. Cut power to minimum during the dive, because we can. Extend air brakes. And air brakes are reasonably effective even in a dive to start slowing you down, but they're not going to work instantaneously, so do keep in mind. So we're lining up for landing on the runway. So some things to note, you definitely, when you come in to land, you definitely want to get your gear down below 250 knots. So we're just going to slowly decrease altitude and get our gear down below, we'll extend gear down below 250 knots. You definitely want to try to land at, with a lot of the aircraft in DCS, you want to have your vertical velocity indicator right there, and keep an eye on it. You want to try to land between 0 vertical velocity and 1. Ideally somewhere around the 0.5. That way that's going to indicate how fast you're decreasing. And if you're above -1 and below 0, you'll come in for a nice, gentle landing. So you won't put that, again, you won't put that pressure on the gear. So here we are lined up. You want to definitely line up to the runway around like 2,000 to 3,000 feet. That's where a lot of traffic patterns sit. Again, we're going to be doing a more dedicated traffic pattern video before, so we're... There we go. Get throttle up. So we're below 250 knots. We extended gear. We can see that we have extended gear because our 3 gear lights are now green and active. So our gear is down. We want to get onto the final waypoint heading right there. Now we can set up the HUD. If you have a waypoint setting, there we go. Let's see here. All right, we'll cover. Depending on how you set up the your landing indicator, you might get a green box over the runway to show where it is. So, okay, now we're on final approach. I'm going to pause right here. All right, so for final approach, we want to try to get the aircraft below 200 knots on touchdown. We want to get to below 200 knots on touchdown, and again, vertical velocity. We want to try to keep that above -1 here and 0. So here we go. Throttle to idle. You can use air brakes to help you deaccelerate, but only do it in a short burst because your airspeed will drop too low, and if you start getting to around 180 knots, you're going to start falling out of the sky. So now that we're at 190, this is good. 180, we're starting to get a little bit risky now. 175, you really don't want to be in 175 for long. You also want to nose up, because if you nose up, that'll help flare your aircraft upon landing. 160, that's good. 160 is the slowest I would be, and you would want to be 160 right above the threshold. Cut power now. 150. Let the aircraft slowly settle down. There you go. All right, so you definitely to review that, you definitely want to be, you definitely don't want to come in for the landing approach at a lower than 180. Once you start nearing the threshold, you can then start decreasing your airspeed to lower and lower amounts, but I would do it very gradually. So go from like 180, 170, 160, 150. Try to keep their vertical velocity indicator right here, somewhat near the horizon. You'll really keep that somewhat near the horizon, so that way you're still keeping you're not coming in too sharply down. You definitely also don't want to you definitely want to also keep your nose pointed in the air as long as possible, because that'll help you aero brake, which will help you slow down. You definitely, if you land it too fast, the other problem is that you won't be able to stop in time, because your airspeed will be too high and it'll take too long for you to actually use your brakes and come to a halt. So once we touch down, like we are right now, and all of our wheels are down, you want to hit the parachute. Now, you can look down here and use this drag chute lever here, or you can hit the P key, which I'm about to, and you'll see your speed drastically decrease. And now we can activate nose wheel steering. And hit the P key again. And it'll cut the parachute, and we'll be good to go. Alright. Find the nearest taxiway, which is indicated by these yellow signs here. So that's taxi or exit ramp D. And get off. There we go. Don't feel definitely. You can definitely be a little bit fast when you're trying to exit the runway. Don't be too fast, because then you'll crash, and you'll wipe out onto the grass. But definitely don't feel afraid to take it a little bit fast, just because you definitely want to clear the runway so that the next person can use it. Now, if you do have the Eclair ECW pod equipped, you will lose access to the parachute, and in which case it's going to be very important for you to hold the nose up for as absolutely long as possible. That way you'll use the Mirage's wide triangular delta wing body to aggressively slow down, and then that way you'll come to a nice relatively fast stop with just that. You can also use air brakes if you absolutely need to. It's not in the official procedures, but you can use the air brakes while landing to slow you down just a little bit extra. You can also then once you're down with all 4 wheels, go ahead and start applying wheel brakes. I wouldn't hold W because it'll lock up the brakes and you'll start skidding. Go ahead and just keep on tapping W and you'll eventually slow down. The other thing to note is if you are worried that you are coming if you are worried about not having enough distance to land, say you don't have the parachute equipped and you don't have the parachute equipped, try to come in slower. That's the other thing to note about landing in the Mirage 2000C. You can definitely always land. Try to land a little bit slower. If you land within speed or slightly slow and use the aero braking, you should be able to stop on pretty much every runway, unless you're talking about some like ultra short runway. So do keep that in mind with landing, and you should be able to land and stick most of your landings. And in fact, I'm going to pause right here before I stop and go outside. And if you see, our tires are intact. We managed to stick the landing. You'll also notice that our fuel tank is still attached. You don't. It is actually technically, with most air forces, highly discouraged that you jettison your fuel tank when it's empty. If you want a more quote-unquote authentic flying experience or a bit more of a challenge, go ahead and keep your fuel tank attached while flying. Definitely only jettison if you're in a combat situation and you need the extra bit of speed and maneuverability. So that's another little tip for you before we go ahead and put our Mirage 2000C into parking. Other things I can think of, really just a quick little review. Again, taking off and landing, you definitely want to come in. You definitely don't want to be above really 180 on the ground. Either landing or taking off, you definitely want to get your wheels off the ground. You want to keep the wheels off the ground at above 180 airspeed, just because your wheels there's a good chance that any faster than that, and your wheels will start popping. Let's see, here's that. While flying, do keep in mind if you do get a warning while flying, that is possibly because your external fuel tank is empty and you can switch over to air-to-air configuration mode for more maneuverability. Do keep in mind also, Mirage is effectively, your max effective ceiling is going to be around 35,000 feet. You can obviously fly higher, but doing so, you're going to struggle a bit with performance in a turning engagement, but you can definitely intercept targets in a straight line at above 4,000, above 35,000 feet, no problem. Burner is your after. You don't have to worry about going into afterburner to gain significant speed in the Mirage. You can easily put it into 100% RPM, and you'll definitely gain speed in a climb or in a gentle climb or flying straight. And keep your RPM closer to around 95 to 85% for long duration cruising. That's what I find to be a good balance between speed and fuel efficiency. Other than that, keep, again, a good cruising altitude for the Mirage 2000C on DCS servers or in missions in general is around 25,000 feet. That's low enough. That's high enough that you'll have plenty of potential energy to use in a dogfight to descend. But that's also low enough that you'll be able to use your radar a bit more effectively, so you're not missing anyone coming in from below. And other than that, again, landing, you want to keep around. You want to start your approach roughly around 4, maybe 5,000 feet, pretty far out, and then as you get closer in, keep your vertical velocity above 100. I believe that's in 100 feet. Yep, 1,000 feet per minute. You want to keep your vertical velocity above 1,000 feet per minute descending. So keep it between 0 and 1 right here. Come in for a nice gentle landing. Flare when you land to slow down, and don't land above 180 knots. Try to land closer to around 150 if you can. And whenever you brake, make sure all 3 wheels are on the ground and pull the chute. That is something I should mention. The chute will if you deploy the chute and your aircraft doesn't have all 3 wheels on the ground, the chute will disappear and you'll lose access to it. So do keep that in mind. So that's it for your basic flight tutorial in the Mirage 2000C. See you all next time, where we're going to cover navigation.